Welcome to The Waves, Slate's podcast about gender, feminism, and covens, real and imaginary. Every episode, you get a new pair of women to talk about the thing we can't get off our minds. And today you've got me, Rebecca Onion, a senior editor at Slate.
And me, Jess Zimmerman. I write about feminism, monsters, witches, and all manner of scary ladies.
Well, as my 5-year-old says about witches, they are, quote, the only girl monsters, unquote. Now, I know that's not true, as Jess, my co-host for today, can attest, but they are certainly the first archetypal spooky, scary figures that a 5-year-old like mine would know about that are coded female. Now, as a history person, I am, of course, really interested in how the idea of witchery adheres to various things that women do over history. And as spooky season's premiere month, October, winds down, we wanted to take a minute on the waves to talk about how witches are faring in 2022. And we're going to use a pretty silly, I don't know what you think, Jess, new movie, Hocus Pocus 2, to do it.
I have a gift for my favorite customers. Legend has it, it's on the 16th birthday that a witch gets her powers.
Well, I have great news for your kid, because there are actually so many female-coded monsters, and I'm really interested in all of them, which is why I wanted to talk about witches with you today. My book, Women and Other Monsters, is about female monsters from Greek myths, and I also co-wrote a book called Basic Witches that's all about taking inspiration from the cultural image of the witch, which is very relevant to Hocus Pocus. What those ideas have in common is that we use these monstrous figures to sort of encode expectations about women and women-adjacent people. Most of those expectations are pretty constraining. So these scary women are meant to be cautionary tales. But, of course, it's more fun to read them as a how-to guide.
Coming up in the next segment, we are going to talk about Hocus Pocus, the original, and Hocus Pocus 2. Hey there. Thanks for listening to The Waves. If you're loving the show, and we really hope you are, subscribe to our feed. New episodes come out every Thursday morning. While you're there, check out our other episodes too, like last week's about why some people find women's voices so problematic.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs.
Vic said something.
Music.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.
I am so excited to be talking about Hocus Pocus, the original from 1993, and Hocus Pocus 2, which just came out at the end of September. Jess, explain what these movies are, and maybe say a little about what your relationship is with them.
I actually thought that I hadn't seen Hocus Pocus 1, and then I rewatched it and I realized, I think I saw this in the theaters. It's sort of a silly, funny, but also a little bit scary witch movie that is so ingrained in the culture and that has so many kind of references and callbacks that I 100% forgot that I had actually seen, the original model. Because I think it really has, this is one of the portrayals of witches that if you are an 80s kid or a 90s kid, I think really had an impact on sort of what you imagine when you imagine a coven or when you imagine, witches run amok.
These witches are very much run amok. These witches are a threat.
Sisters! All Hallows Eve has become a night of frolic, where children wear costumes and run amok. Amok. Oh, really, just one child.
So it's a trio. It's a trio.
It's a trio, and the trio is very common and popular in sort of images of witchcraft, but also images in mythology. You've got the three fates, you've got the three graces, the Gorgons, the Morrigan. They reference this in Hocus Pocus 2. You've got the figures of the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And that's very classic. And I was also like reading Sandman at this time, and the maiden and mother and crone show up in there. So very deep mythological roots. But what's so interesting going back to it as an adult in 2022, sort of looking back at an earlier time, is that these three really, to me, are figuring as the trio of nasty tropes about women. You've got the slut, the shrew, and the glutton. Or, if you will, the sexy baby, the monster on the hill, and too big to hang out.
These are all like witches from, what the movie sort of gestures at as Puritan times. In the flashback, you see them kind of like become witches and be destroyed. But they're not actually destroyed, of course. They're put under a spell that allows them to come back later. So we should say it's Bette Midler, who's Winifred, the main sister. She's the powerful one. Is she the monster?
She's the powerful one, but also the angry one. She's cavilling all the time. She is egotistical. She, doesn't really value her sisters. Like, she's unequivocally, I think, the leader of these three. To me, to be a leader is a positive quality. But I think in 1993, to be like the woman leader of a band of women, it was a little bit like, she's almost like a scary mother-in-law kind of trope, like pushy.
Mm-hmm. She, like, when she's in the room, all of the like eyes are going to be on her in one way or another, kind of.
Because she's going to demand that, yeah.
So you have her, and then you have her sister, played by Sarah Jessica Parker, who's quite clearly the sexy baby, who's got the power to call children to her. She's like beautiful and kind of like airheaded a little bit. I don't know, is that fair to say? She's played that way.
I was wondering, watching it, like, how many sort of weird girls were, like, of my era were influenced by this way of sort of portraying yourself. Because it's like very, very, like, sort of scary child.
She's like beautiful, but also like unhinged in this very particular way.
And like very thirsty in a way that surprised me. Like every time, a man is on screen, she's like, a boy.
Yeah, that's right. Even a teenage boy,
yeah.
Which we'll talk about. And then we should also say Kathy Najimy's character, who I guess her thing is that she's hungry. I don't know. She's the least articulated one.
It's absolutely her thing. She doesn't really have a personality, except that every time there's food on screen, she wants to eat it. And they kept that in Hocus Pocus 2, even though she lost a ton of weight. They still had to have the glutton character because, I don't know, they'd run out of like nasty tropes about women. Like, they forgot to give her a personality beyond that. So
yeah, maybe. No, her personality in Hocus Pocus 2 is that she's the one who uses Roombas as a broom.
Yeah.
That's like the main thing that I remember about that character. So these are the Sanderson sisters, of course, we have to say. The Sanderson sisters from the quote-unquote Puritan times get sort of trapped with the help of a spell. And the action of the movie is that these teens in Hocus Pocus 1, these teens and also the 10-year-old sister of the boy teen, accidentally release them and then basically entrap them again, like put them back into the box.
Yeah, I think they run out the clock. They're brought back for one night, and the kids manage to prevent them from becoming immortal until the sun comes up, and then they have to go back to being dead.
And the way that they sort of get their immortality is by eating children, or like eating children's life force, or eating virgins' life forces, maybe. So there's this whole sort of like, I don't know, internet not conspiracy theory, I guess, reading of this movie that where the two teenage characters, the boy has a big crush on the girl. And through the course of the movie, the witches try to lure all the kids into the woods to basically suck their souls and become like immortal and have like all the juice that they need.
Virgin juice.
Yeah, exactly. By the end of the movie, the boy who has at the beginning of the movie lit the candle that only a virgin can light in order to bring the witches back. He has successfully done it, so we know he's a virgin at the beginning of the movie. And the theory is that by the end of the movie, he's no longer a virgin, although it's not shown because he doesn't respond to the bewitching spell.
Oh,
I don't know what you think about that.
No, that's very, I hadn't thought about it. I was taking notes while I was watching it, and I was like, what? How do they define a child? Because I feel like, the teen audience of this movie probably would not have taken well to the implication that their souls will do. They're 16, the main characters, and so I don't think they want to, they have driver's licenses. They don't want to have their souls work to extend the life of a witch. But it hadn't occurred to me that virginity was which I do not like that.
I know. Well, I watched this recently. The first one I watched at a community, a showing at a community event. They do these things in my town where they show a movie behind the community center for anyone to come who wants, it's projected or whatever. And as the little jokes about sex kept coming out, all of the adults were looking at each other like, oh God, what is this? It's pretty interesting how sort of sex focused it is.
There's a moment in Hocus Pocus 2 where they have, they sort of hang the lampshade on that because the guy's doing the presentation about how only a virgin can light the black flame candle.
That if a virgin should light the black flame candle on All Hallows Eve, with a full moon in the sky, the Sanderson sisters vowed they would one day return to take revenge on all of Salem.
What's a virgin?
That is a person who has never lit a candle.
Well, so in Hocus Pocus 2, I think it's interesting to think about how they changed it quite a bit because the vibe of both the movies is sort of similar, where it's that kind of Disney's almost. These movies are not made by Steven Spielberg, but they're Spielbergian kind of small town, a mix of comedy and horror. Now, I watched Hocus Pocus 2 with the aforementioned 5-year-old, and there was 1 minute where she did get scared and want to come up in my lap. But generally, I wouldn't say it's scary per se. But it feels like in the 2022 Hocus Pocus 2, that this sort of 90s undercurrent of sexual content is sort of scrubbed a little bit, or they seems like they don't really want to play with that too much. And I actually feel like the witches in 2022 Hocus Pocus 2 are in general a little bit less creepy.
The genre of these movies is tough to pin down. It's got a real let's put on a show feel to it. It's so camp, but it's also, I guess, supposed to be scary. I mean, the stakes are not you don't really feel deeply invested in any of it, but I am at this point an adult. So there clearly sort of is this element of horror, but there's also very much an element of comedy, and not you wouldn't really do a regular comedy this broad. But I wonder whether the toning down of the sex references is just because teen sex comedy romps aren't really a thing the way that they were in the 90s. That's just that's not what people are going to the movies for in the same way. And so the elements of a comedy are different, and the what you expect to see in a comedy and what you expect to find funny is different.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, I had this little theory that maybe it was because the filmmakers were a little bit worried about sort of activating the anti-groomer, the people on the right who are kind of ready to seize upon any mention of sex in children's entertainment to become angry. But I think that might be an overread, possibly. Well, so while I was doing research for this, I found that in 2015 there was an article on Vox.com that was basically a broad argument that Hocus Pocus is a bad movie and that we only like it because of nostalgia. So I guess my question is, do you think that Hocus Pocus or Hocus Pocus 2 are good movies? Or are we just we miss the 90s? And or we're looking for something to watch at Halloween that with our children that is not like too scary.
No, right? They're not. They're not. They're not good movies. And I actually said when I was rewatching Hocus Pocus 1, I was like, God, you just couldn't make a movie like this today because today movies are trying to be good. I don't even know that it's trying to be good. And because this is the thing about it being like broader than any straight up comedy you would ever do. Like you don't direct movies this way. Movies are trying to be good mostly. But I also feel like for many people it doesn't matter, right? When something is this much of a, there's a magic in it actually. When something is this much of a like talisman of nostalgia and like sort of a crystal ball that contains your childhood, it doesn't, there's many movies that are very, very near to my heart that are not good movies by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't hold up, but I also think it probably was never good or even trying to be good.
We're going to take a break here, but if you want to hear more from Jess and myself on another topic, check out our Waves Plus segment, Is This Feminist? And so today we've already referred to it. We're going to be talking about Taylor Swift's new music video for her song Anti-Hero. And we're going to talk about whether it's feminist.
And please consider supporting the show by joining Slate Plus. Members get benefits like 0 ads on any Slate podcast, no paywall on the Slate site, and bonus content of shows like Amicus, Slate Money, and of course this one. To learn more, go to slate.com/thewavesplus.
This episode of The Waves is brought to you by They Did That. The people who get credit for a lot of innovation these days, they all kind of look alike. Don't you want to learn who really did the work? Well, that's exactly what you'll hear on They Did That, a new podcast from Something Else and Sony Music Entertainment that introduces you to the little-known people who changed the world through fashion, technology, science, and more. Sometimes these creators were simply overlooked, the victims of discrimination, or in some cases had their discoveries deliberately stolen. You'll hear stories of global pioneers and trailblazers, both dead and alive, that changed things like healthcare treatments, dry cleaning, filmmaking, cinematography, and even the sports bra. We'll learn about the people who should have received credit for their work a long time ago and finally give them their well-deserved respect. Listen and follow They Did That wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Call ourselves the Holy Trinity because why not? Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls. We take people from all over the world. And we have incredible guests from the world of music and comedy, politics, activism, you name it.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs.
Vic said something.
Music.
Songs.
Music.
We make up songs. I love to laugh. I love to have fun. All the best. I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.
All right, so now we're going to talk about witches in culture in 2022. And Jess, I'm so glad to have you here because I feel like you have a comprehensive witch knowledge in a way that I maybe don't. So we just sort of referred to our feelings about Hocus Pocus and Hocus Pocus 2 feeling like a throwback to sort of a more carefree time in the representation of witches. My immediate comparison point is a movie like The Witch from 2016, by Robert Eggers that I really loved, which is a movie about a, I guess, Puritan family who splits off from their colony and goes to live in the woods and encounters an extremely dangerous, extremely disgusting witch in the woods who eats their baby and kills them one by one. No spoilers. That's a thing that is really playing with this idea of the witch as like something on the margins that inspires fear in people. That is a little bit more present in some other examples I can think of, like Roald Dahl's classic the Witches book, which, although it's for children, much like Hocus Pocus, is like a little bit genuinely scary. And I sort of like those things. I sort of prefer those darker witch visions. And I wonder what you think is going on in the sort of cultural ether right now when it comes to representations of witches.
It was interesting to notice in Hocus Pocus 2, right, which I was very much sort of watching for evidence of the way in which the sort of import of being called a witch or being associated with witches, like how that's changed over that almost 3 decades. Oh, God. But so we're talking about, in a sense, like multiple meanings of what it means to be a witch and multiple sort of visions of the witch. And we have, you mentioned that this is a Puritan town, and there's not like an implication that they were part of the sort of mass hysteria Salem witch trials, right? Because it's clear that they actually are witches, and they are actually punished for being witches, although Hocus Pocus 2 like adds a little bit of context to that. But so you've got the very sort of Puritan idea of the witch, which is like the woman on the margins. She doesn't fit into society. She has to be punished because she's sort of seeing this other way to live. She's othered, and that is very scary in the sense that it is a threat to the status quo. And then you've got the 2022 version of witchcraft, in which it now is, you know, something that a lot of people practice very proudly, and that they either feel some kind of like connection to the history of witchcraft in this country, or they feel a connection to pagan religion, or they feel just like sort of a syncretic magic and empowerment. People have various relationships to witchcraft, but these are positive relationships, and they, sort of proudly think of themselves as witches, or do witch-related religion and witch-related culture, witch-related ritual, and this is all very, very positive. And then you've kind of got the Hocus Pocus witches who are sort of sitting at the middle of this in a way that, as we were talking about in the last segment, is a little bit hard to pin down, because they are supposed to be the sort of bugbear of the Puritans. They scared their community so much that they were put to death. We're supposed to find them scary, but they're also a little silly, and they're also, witches in the exact same way as these girls who are the main focus of Hocus Pocus 2, who do these rituals together. It's an important aspect of their friendship, and one of them discovers that she also, in fact, has innate witch powers. And so you see there's a moment in Hocus Pocus 2 where she's like coming into her power, and her friend is like, oh my God, you're actually a witch. And it's like, clearly, like, this is so great, this is so amazing. And then moments later, she's talking to Winnie, and she says, you witch. So, like, that's still there,
That's so interesting that you point that out, because in the original Hocus Pocus, there's not there's not none of that. Like, the teenagers are not like dabbling in witchcraft. What they're doing is messing around in the old Sanderson house, like sneaking around. Yeah, and then in this new one, there is this group of 3 girls, and that was the part that made me kind of sad. Is that, there's a group of 3 girls who've been friends since childhood and had always done this like ritual basically at one of their birthdays, and the 3rd girl had gotten a boyfriend and stopped hanging out with them. And then by the end, of course, they're restored to each other as like a little sisterhood.
It basically, sex is the enemy in this one. It's like the goal in the original, and in this one, it's like, oh, a boy has come in and ruined everything.
I actually feel like in Hocus Pocus 2, these witches are really absolved of quite a bit in certain ways. Like, the ending of it is really like tender. The 2 sisters are disappeared. They figure out how to basically like make the sisters kind of like go into the air in like a puff of sparkles. And then Winifred, the Bette Midler, the leader character, sort of chooses to follow her sisters.
My doing has been my undoing. My folly my fate. What is this feeling? Oh, I think it is my heart. I fear it is breaking. Oh, I cannot bear this. I must find a way. My sisters. Look, I must find a way.
It recapitulates, themes that they had set up earlier in the movie about how, your coven is the most important thing and power has to be shared and all of that.
Yes, and it also sort of refers back to the beginning of Hocus Pocus 2, where the Sanderson sisters flashback shows how these girls are basically sort of like rejected by the community for not wanting to marry the way that the church thinks they're supposed to marry, which is a different thing from being rejected by the community because you eat the children's souls, which literally at the beginning of Hocus Pocus 1, you see them eat a child. Like, not like physically, but you see them kill a child.
That was very interesting to me that I don't know that it's exactly sanitizing the Sandersons. Well, it is, it's giving them the Cruella treatment, which is that, like, yes, they're evil, but they have this sort of sad backstory. And this is, that's accurate, I think, to the way that these witch panics came about, right? Which is that they are threatening the status quo because they're supposed to get married in the expected way, and they're not supposed to, care about their sisters more than they care about the community and, and taking part in sort of the expected trappings of femininity.
Right. Or sometimes they were like doing things like providing medical assistance for abortions. Not to be too topical.
No, the real witch, yeah, absolutely. I think it was less likely to be like, oh, you're a 16-year-old and you won't get married, and more likely to be, you're an old woman, you are a widow, so you have money and property, which we don't like, and or you're providing, infrastructure-free medical care.
Right. You're giving herbs that may or may not work, but the point is that you had the intention to do that.
So in a way, it's more historically accurate because it makes their threat a threat to the community and not, an actual literal evil. But they are still, like, it's the same characters. If you want to revisit those characters are, in fact, literally sucking the lives out of children so that they can stay young. So you do kind of have to reckon with that. And I don't know that it ever really reconciles that.
No, and to me that points to sort of an interesting conundrum. Like, I feel like when it comes to witches in entertainment, like even The Witch, which I just lauded, and I still do think is a very good movie, that everyone who has the tolerance for extreme tension should probably see. Even The Witch, like the choice to sort of say, like, witchcraft is real, and the antagonist in my movie is going to be a witch woman who does harm to people, and does harm to people in like these particular like massacre of the innocent kind of ways. Like, to me, that's a real choice in 2022. And I wonder, I mean, I don't know. I love Robert Eggers. I would never say that, he did something capital P problematic. It reads differently from some other witch-based entertainment that I really like, which, like, to me, it's like you could almost make a horror movie from the other side and have the POV be the woman who's being accused of being a witch and cannot escape the community, which to me is a terrifying idea.
Yeah, and this is sort of always a difficult hurdle to get over if you're kind of reclaiming the image of the witch as sort of a female empowerment symbol, which certainly, like, my book Basic Witches was part of that trend, which, I would have thought would burn itself out by now. That book's from 2017, but it's clearly still going, right? Because we have it. It's still, the girl power witch is still sort of present in Hocus Pocus 2. But that's always been something that you kind of have to juggle, is if the sort of image of the witch being hunted by the community for being an outsider is going to be an image that sort of spurs us to feminism, there's an urge to say, oh, yes, they were so powerful. They were doing this magic. They were feared for their power. But, like, if they actually were magical and actually were, blighting crops and eating children and stuff like that, that really makes the social commentary kind of blunts it, because you sort of see why people might get worked up about that.
Before we head out, we want to give some recommendations. So Jess, what are you loving right now?
Well, this is a little self-serving because I actually co-edited this, but there is a brand new book called Toil and Trouble by Lisa Kroger and Melanie Anderson, and it's a history of women in Western occultism, so very relevant to all of the stuff that we've just been talking about. If you're interested in real-life witchcraft and magic and esoterica, it's a really wonderful survey of how women and non-binary people have used the occult as a way of regaining the power that they've historically been denied access to.
Well, I have a slightly older endorsement that I just became aware of and loved. I'm going to endorse the audiobook of a book called The Mercies, which is by an author named Kiran Milwood Hargrave. And this audiobook is read by the actress Jessie Buckley, and I thought she did a really good job. This is about a little 17th century Norwegian fishing village, and there's a giant storm that kills all of the men, like all of the men are out on their boats and go down. But that just happens at the beginning, and then the bulk of the action of the book is about how the women basically resurrect their village, and then how their resurrection sort of comes to the notice of the authorities in the church, who send basically what turns out to be a witch hunter up to take the women in hand. And it's also the book that had me thinking so much about how horrible it would be to be accused of being a witch and to be unable to escape. And so I highly recommend it. Well, that's our show this week. The Waves is produced by Cheyna Roth.
Shannon Palus is our editorial director. Daisy Rosario is senior supervising producer of audio. Alicia Montgomery is vice president of audio.
We'd really love to hear from you, so email us at thewaves@slate.com.
The Waves will be back next week. Different hosts, different topic, same time and place.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs.
Vic said something.
Music.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.